If someone handed you $100,000 in 2026, there's a good chance your first reaction wouldn't be excitement or relief. It would be a quiet, practical question forming in the back of your head. How long does this actually last? And that reaction alone tells us something important, because $100,000 used to mean you had crossed a line, that you were safe, that you had finally separated yourself from financial stress. But in 2026, it doesn't feel like freedom so much as it feels like a pause button on anxiety, a brief moment where nothing is actively on fire, but you can still smell the smoke. The number didn't get smaller, but its meaning did, and that's the part nobody really prepares you for, because we still talk about six figures the way people talked about them 20 or 30 years ago, as if the environment stayed frozen while the number kept its power. In reality, the cost of simply existing has changed in a way that makes $100,000 feel less like a destination and more like a checkpoint, because housing absorbs income before you ever feel it. Insurance feels mandatory but never comforting. Groceries don't spike so much as quietly creep. Subscriptions stack invisibly. And every normal expense carries a sense of permanence that it didn't used to have. So when people reach $100,000, whether that's income, savings, or net worth, they don't feel rich. They feel exposed, because now they can see the math clearly enough to realize how fast it disappears if something goes wrong, and exposure is not the same thing as security. That's why so many people with six figures still check their accounts daily, hesitate to spend even on things they need, and feel a strange guilt when they rest. Not because they're irresponsible or bad with money, but because their nervous system understands something their spreadsheets don't. The environment changed and the milestone didn't. If you're new here, my name is John, and I'm not here to sell you hustle fantasies or tell you that you're one mindset shift away from financial peace. What I do instead is break down how money actually feels, why certain numbers change your brain, and why others quietly stop working, even though everyone still pretends they should. And $100,000 is one of the clearest examples of that disconnect in 2026. What makes $100,000 especially confusing is that it creates an identity shift before it creates safety, because once you reach it, your brain stops dreaming about making more and starts worrying about losing what you have. And that shift happens quietly, without permission, and without warning. Before the milestone, the story is simple. If I can just get there, things will calm down. But after the milestone, the story becomes more complicated, because now there's something to protect, and protection requires vigilance, and vigilance creates stress. This is the stage where people feel like they should be confident, should feel settled, and should finally relax. But instead, they feel hyper aware, because their sense of responsibility upgrades faster than their sense of protection, and no one talks about that part. This is also where the illusion of net worth starts to fall apart, because your brain doesn't actually care about totals or round numbers. It cares about runway, about how many months of life your money can support if nothing goes right. $100,000 sounds massive until you divide it by time, and suddenly it's 12 months, or 9 months or less, depending on where you live and what your obligations look like. And now you're not wealthy, you're counting down, and countdowns don't create peace, they create pressure. Add social comparison to that, where you don't measure yourself against past versions of you, but against people who seem calmer, safer, and further ahead. And even a six-figure milestone can feel strangely inadequate, not financially, but existentially, because it's no longer about having more than you used to have. It's about whether what you have is enough to protect the life you're already living. This is where many people make the mistake of thinking the solution is simply a bigger number, that if $100,000 doesn't feel good, then $250,000 will, or $500,000 will, or maybe $1 million will. But if the structure of your money doesn't change, the feeling often doesn't either, because more money inside the same fragile system doesn't automatically create safety. It just increases the stakes, and higher stakes without predictability create more fear, not less. Here's the part nobody puts in a thumbnail and almost nobody explains clearly. $100,000 still feels broke in 2026 because it is no longer meant to be the finish line. It's the transition point, the moment where chasing impressive numbers stops working and building systems starts to matter. Real financial relief doesn't come from round milestones, flex screenshots, or symbolic thresholds. It comes from predictability, from knowing your basics are covered, your worst month won't break you, and your future doesn't hinge on one decision going perfectly. That's why some people with less money feel calmer than people with more, because what actually replaces the old $100,000 milestone isn't a higher dollar amount. It's time, measured in months of life rather than dollars in an account. And when your money stops being a pile and starts being runway, something shifts internally because time is what your brain actually wants, not status. When you understand that, you stop asking how big your number is and start asking how quiet your life feels. And that question changes everything because quiet is what security actually feels like. If you've ever felt guilty for not feeling rich at $100,000, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not ungrateful, you're not broken, and you're not bad with money. You're just living in a world where the old milestones don't protect you anymore. And once you see that clearly, you stop chasing numbers that don't calm your nervous system and start building something that actually does, which is the real shift people think money is supposed to give them, but rarely does.